Welcome to the Constitution Committee. First of all, take apologies for absence. I've had apologies from Councillor Nigel Robbins. I do not believe there are any other apologies. So I'm going to move to minutes of the previous meeting, which were on the 9th of March. That feels like a world away now. Everyone happy to approve those minutes? Show of hands. I've got enough hands up. Yep, that's all.
Take those as approved.
Public questions? None.
None.
Members' questions?
None.
None. Item 5, which is the update to Gloucestershire County Council Constitution.
Mark,
70.
Sorry to interrupt. Is there not a Green person on this committee?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Used to be.
Not on Constitution Committee.
Leslie, it's either your party or the Green Party, and when the group split, then you took that seat.
Me.
Excellent. I'm not sure quite where that was on the agenda, but we'll take it as a question, and it was duly answered. So, moving on to the GCC Constitution, pages 7 to 100. All the bits that are in change are marked up in red. Rob, just talk us through the process, and then we'll sort of open it up.
Yes. So, as members of this committee, you'll be aware that changes get made to the Constitution on an ongoing basis quite frequently. That's usually in response to a change in the way the council wants to work, or a change in staff within the council, or some new specific issue that arises. But doing it that way does mean that from time to time it's worth taking a step back and looking at the document end to end. Otherwise, you can get contradictions creeping in, or even some sections that don't get looked at for a long time becoming out of date. So that's what we've tried to do since taking over as monitoring officer just about a year ago. I and a group of colleagues have been through the Constitution from one end to the other, checking the legislation, checking that it's up to date, and making sure that there aren't any anomalies. This paper is the culmination of the first phase of that work, and it brings forward a range of changes that fall into a couple of categories. Some of them are where legislation has either been updated or rescinded and isn't relevant anymore. We've made some changes where the Constitution hasn't kept pace with council practice or custom or council structures. On the way through the document, we did find one or two anachronisms and anomalies, some of which could cause some confusion or ambiguity, so we've tried to address those. An example of that would be the fact that the Economic Growth Joint Committee actually features in the part of the Constitution that talks about regulatory and non-executive committees, when actually it is an executive committee. So things like that need to be clarified in order to get rid of any ambiguity. And then, as you'll see through the changes I've made, there are a small number of cross-referencing or typographical errors that we've picked up. Alongside the changes that we've brought here, we are redrafting some of the main sections that fall within parts 4 and 5 of the Constitution, but those are going to be brought to the next meeting of the committee for you to discuss and hopefully recommend on to council. As Mark said, to help you understand the changes we've made, we've done them in track changes, so they show up in red in the document, but I've also added some annotations in yellow highlighted text so that you can understand the rationale for each particular change. I'm very happy to take any specific questions you've got on any part that needs further explanation, but if you could help me just by referencing the page that you're asking about and give me a moment to find that page, that'll help me enormously. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so the task we have today is to take any questions and make any changes that I will cross that bridge when we get to it. Primarily as a recommendation to our next council meeting. So we don't make the changes, we make a recommendation to council. So I'm going to open it up, and it would be useful if you could, as Rob said, indicate which bits you want to quiz. and we'll take it from there. This meeting could be as long as short as the document itself. So who wants to kick off?
So, Mark, we've got Nigel Moore, Leslie
Where
Williams,
are you seeing these? Because
and John. They're appearing on my screen with hands up.
they're not appearing on my screen with hands up.
No, what I'll do is I'll allocate you as co-host.
Okay,
And you-
because that'd be quite useful because I can't actually see the hands up.
You're still looking to speak, Nigel? You had a hand
Not
up.
at the moment, no. I think I was searching to look at participants earlier on.
Right. So it's now I can see now it's John Payne and Richard Boyles are the two people that want to speak.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak can either press a button or just wave at me.
And Colin.
As Colin is doing now. So I'm going to take
Yeah.
John, Richard, and Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Just two very simple questions, really. Just by way of clarification, page 21, section 3.04, the first line, it changes scheme to process or information compliance procedures. I just need a bit of an explanation as to what information compliance procedures are. I'm presuming they relate to GRDP, data protection. Whilst we're on, I'll do the other one as well, because I think the other one is a typo on page 76, 21.2. It talks about photographing, etc. It talks about audit recording. I think it should be audio recording. Thanks.
Those numbers don't match the numbers in my pack. This is going to be an interesting meeting.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Fortunately, they do match mine so far, Mark, so I'll have an attempt anyway. So thank you for that second one. You're right, it should be audio, so we will need to update that. This is the problem with doing a lot of changes at once, is that typos creep into the corrections as well as into the original document, don't they? So thank you for that. With regard to the information compliance procedures, yeah, it's a reference to the statutory rights that people have to complain about the way that their data is being handled and processed under GDPR. And it sits alongside, but obviously related to the council's complaints procedure. So that's why it gets a separate reference.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. I think if you do, anyone asking any questions, if they make the page reference, and hopefully yours matches with Rob and not mine, and then whatever section you're talking about, because I can then look the section up at this end. So I think we had Richard next.
Yep, thanks very much, Chair. Rob, in the pack that was emailed out to me, page 82, which is Cabinet Procedure Rules. Have you got that?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm there.
In 1.2, it says the leader of the county council will appoint the cabinet, which will comprise the leader of the county council and between 2 and 9 other county councillors. And then when you go to 5.3, on just below that, it says the quorum for a meeting of the cabinet shall be 4. So are you saying that technically we could have a cabinet of 3, the leader and 2, or is it between 2 and 9, so 3 and 8? And if it is, then we can't have 9.
Sorry, run that by me again, Richard. I didn't quite follow.
I think basically what Richard's saying is that technically under 1.2, you could have the leader of the county council and 2 others. And then when you get to 5, you wouldn't be quorum because you'd have to have 4.
That's a very good point, and one that I'd missed. I'll need to look into that. Because presumably you would also, yes, okay, so we will need to amend that then. So if we added into 5.3, or in the case of a cabinet comprising 3 members, full attendance, something along those lines.
That would cover it.
Thank you, Richard.
That'd be a fairly brave leader did that, though, to be fair. Gosh. Okay. That's a fair point. Richard, have you got any others? No.
No, no more.
Okay, Colin.
Thank you. There's just a question on page, on the iPad it says page 27, but it's actually the printed page 25. But it's section 3, full council functions of a regulatory nature, non-cabinet functions. And economic growth joint committee is being moved out. But there's a few in there which, although are hosted by the county council, aren't county council functions per se, as I understand it. It's a question. So it's things like pensions committee, although we run it, is independent of council, and likewise the pension board. The same goes for the police and crime panel. Again, we host, but we don't have, it's not a county council function as I understand it. Those were the two that I noticed, and then I've just seen the health and wellbeing board, and I think that's a county council function, but of course that includes a lot of people mainly from outside of the county council, but it does have certain powers. So it's just a question as to whether they should be there, or there is another space for joint committees and joint things, and just wondering where that should sit really. I've got another point. Actually, can I come back to that because it's about the constitution as a whole?
So, Colin, I'll need to look into the pension and the police and crime panel one. I am reasonably confident that in the case of the health and wellbeing board, the responsibility for creating one sits with the county council and as a whole county council function. So I think that one is technically correct. The other two I haven't looked at in detail, so we'll do so following this meeting. And I suggest that if it proves that we do need to find a different way of describing them, I'll bring that to the next meeting of the committee.
I think on the police and crime panel, I seem to remember we are the host councils and we are paid an amount by government to facilitate it. So
that's right, Mark. We're the host authority, and we've been appointed as that by the 7 councils in Gloucestershire at the time the police and crime panel was set up.
And I imagine the pension board is the same thing, but it's worthy whether or not there needs to be an asterisk there, just to sort of say something as an
sorry, it's just the other regulatory functions, the rules under which they exercise their regulatory function is based on county council plans, policies and procedures. However, the ones I mentioned aren't necessarily the case, and that's the reason I raise it, because we decide, say, our planning, our plan for planning is what that body has to abide by in coming to a decision. But that's not the case with those others, and that's why I just raised the query. I don't mind where it goes, to be honest, but it was just a query.
Okay, I think we'll have to come back on that one, see how that needs to be treated. Your second question.
Okay, so this is really, I looked as an aside at one time on modern.gov. There was Constitution Committee and Constitution Document. And the Constitution Document seems empty at the moment, so it's not so easy to find it. You've got to go onto the website to find it. So there's that aspect. And then currently, we're not running it wholly in accordance with the county council because there are emergency powers so that we can have meetings like this and so on. And I just wondered whether, not in the Constitution itself, but with the Constitution document, there ought to be almost an add-on which says we are currently running under powers given by government, emergency powers, call it what you like, and these mean that meetings can be virtual or whatever the other functions are. Because if someone's nerdy enough to check what we're doing, it explains that under the current situation, we're not abiding by all of the Constitution rules, and these are the exceptions.
Thank you, Colin. In fact, at some stage, I'm struggling to remember when it was, but at some stage during lockdown, I took a delegated decision under my powers as monitoring officer to add such a protocol. So the fact that you've raised this suggests to me maybe that didn't make it onto the council's website to the latest version. So I will check that after the meeting, but it is now part of the Constitution. Right at the very end, we have a remote meetings protocol and procedures rules, which took immediate effect and remains in place until the 7th of May 2021, which is when the legislation currently comes to an end that enables us to run meetings remotely. So it is in there. It may just be that it hasn't been updated on the website, in which case we'll check and get that done.
It may be on the website, I didn't see it, but it may be that on the front page there's a link that, you know, currently please refer to or whatever. But I think it would be just good practice to highlight the fact that we've got some different rules, whatever they might be.
Okay.
Chair, may I just pick up, just in answer to Colin's questions, it is that you're right, it is within the Constitution, but you're right, in terms of highlighting it to the public, I think that would be a very good idea. It is actually online, it's towards the back of the Constitution, at page 245.
Mark, just looking on Modern Gov, I'm not quite sure if yours is updating, Colin, but I'm looking at mine now. The updated Constitution is there with the remote meeting protocol at the end. So it is current on the website. So maybe it's an issue in terms of update on your iPad, but it is there.
Okay, that might be worth, Colin, you taking that offline if it's not updated in your system, just to see if there's a problem. I'd imagine, Colin, you're probably the person who's actually tried to look it up on there, so it might not be everyone. Okay, anyone got any other questions or comments on that? Leslie?
Thank you. Page 29, table 305, item 3. I just wondered whether or not the word retrospective should go in there. It's power to grant planning permission for development already carried out.
Gillian, did you want to answer that one?
Chair, I mean, obviously, that is precisely what that is referring to. It is we're talking about retrospective planning permission. So it's probably taken from the actual legislation, Town and Country Planning Act, in terms of how it's worded. But for clarification, I can't see a problem in including that. But that is what that clause is intending to cover.
No, I realise, but if you ever read planning applications that are retrospective, the word is always there and people understand what it means.
Yeah.
Anyway, just a thought. The other one was I've written down page 35. I can't remember why I did this, but it's about restricted byways. And I now, looking at it, can't remember what my thought was. If it comes back to me, I'll ask in another way, if that's okay.
That's point 12, I think you're talking about, isn't it? How to stop footpaths, bridleways, and restricted byways.
There are several mentions of restricting them if it's required or unrestricting them, and I just I really can't remember when I read through these what I thought was. I wondered if some of them were contradictory. I'll revisit it and see if I can work out what I was thinking at the time. It's probably the best bet. I don't mind.
Sounds like a plan, Leslie.
Thank you.
Right. Anyone else got any questions?
Oh, and can I just endorse what was said about the emergency stuff? As we are currently in an emergency, I think the more that we can do to actually point out to people, if they do want to delve into the Constitution, that there are these extraordinary powers, because we are going through an unusual time. I think the more that can be said about that, the better, so people are just made aware.
Okay, no, I think that's fair enough. Any
Thanks.
other questions or comments?
I do have another comment, which is where we're referring to training, which a number of the committees require. And this has been raised in the past. All elected members are required to be corporate parents. Understanding what being a corporate parent means is important. And we have in the past talked about the training being, I don't like the word mandatory, but obligatory, that if people are going to be corporate parents, they should do this. I know it's encouraged, but it's not really encouraged very strongly. And I wondered if that could be included in the training that has to go with being an elected member. I know it's something like that the Director of Children's Services would support, but I think that it might bring home to people the importance of the role. I leave it with you.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure what you're recommending.
I am recommended that in the same way that if people are on one of the sort of regulatory committees, they have to have the training. That in our role as corporate parents, which we all are, there should be some statutory training given. I would like to know what Richard thinks.
Chair, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
We've discussed this at the Corporate Parenting Board, and we would want to encourage as strongly as possible all members to take up the training that's offered by the County Council. But as far as I remember, we felt it shouldn't be made mandatory because it wasn't what we felt was right for the way that we wanted to sell what we were trying to do. So I would certainly encourage a really strong recommendation, but whether or not it's mandatory would have to be a decision that sits outside of the corporate parenting group and would have to be decided elsewhere in the council.
I realise that, Richard, and that is always the line that's been taken. But I don't think it's strong enough. And so I'm saying it within this particular committee. I think we're nervous about saying it's that everyone should do it. We do want everyone to do it because there is a reluctance to enforce. But I think we're nervous about doing it, and I think we shouldn't be.
Okay. Now, my understanding is that the regulatory training is required as it's stipulated by law. That you need to be trained in planning if you're to sit on a planning committee.
Yeah.
That's right, and I think the other factor, of course, is that you can remove somebody from a panel from such a committee if they refuse to do that training. We would have no mechanism for enforcing a requirement that all councillors undertook training, because, of course, we can't remove a councillor for that reason. What we can do, as you say, Leslie, is strongly encourage, and it's a timely interjection, because we've got the first of what I'm sure will be many planning meetings for the election tomorrow as officers, and one of the items on the agenda is induction training, so we'll be sure to include corporate parenting training as part of that induction plan.
Okay, cool. I think that's pretty much where we are on that one. So anyone got any other questions or points they wish to raise? Lyndon.
Thank you. Within the scheme of delegation, I can't see anything that relates to, with regard to the consultation with either the leader or a cabinet member, which relates to bad debt write-off. And if you look DCR 4, which is on page 57, mentions the Executive Director of Corporate Resources formulating general guidelines. But given that there are quite a lot of limits of 250,000 elsewhere noted as consultation levels, I'm going to have to say I thought we got in place a lower level with regard to bad debt write-off, but I can't see it. And I think there ought to be cabinet member sign-off on a bad debt write-off. And I think that in the past, there has been, and I have to say I've been quite challenging around some of those write-offs and the history that led to those write-offs. And I think that it is a safeguard for the council that you do have that challenge potential. Now, I can't see it, but you know, one has to say it might be there somewhere. But
I'm frantically leafing through mine and can't find it, but it may be that it's within the finance regulations. But again, we'll take it away, we'll have a look at it, and if there isn't a reference, then we'll bring that back to the next meeting of the committee.
okay.
Anyone got anything else? No, I'm not seeing any hands. I'm assuming the ones that I can actually see in the chat are all zombie hands from earlier. Yeah, they're all disappearing now. Apart from Colin, but he seems to be intently staring at his screen, so I'm assuming he's trying to work out how to get rid of it. So,
okay, my name up there at the moment either. I can see me. Apologies for that. It's down.
It's down. Okay, right. In that case, the recommendation before us is that we recommend these to go forward to full council for ratification. All those in favour, please show. That is carried.
So that marks subject to the clarification. So there's some of those things you've got to come back to members on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, and that can be brought back at a future meeting. So that should be fine. If that's it, that's all we've got in front of us today. Let me just go back to the agenda. Yep. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.